And I don't really need to give an introduction to our next speaker because he's already spoken here this morning. But just to put it into a little bit of context, because following on Liz's keynote here, it's interesting to find out the current status of web accessibility in Europe. And so I'm very glad that Mikael Snaprud, who is here, representing Tingtun, which is the lead organization in the EIII consortium, will announce the preliminary benchmarking results from our project. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Mikael back to the podium.
Thank you very much, Kim. This is a very interesting moment for us to share results from the measurements that has been going on for quite a while. We also need to introduce some further results from the project. They will come in later panels today. I'll just give an overview, a brief contact list for who you can talk to if you're interested in more details about these. So please, if you turn on the presentation. So I'm first of all very glad that we can have this gathering here today in the Committee of the Regions, because from this place and from the activities going on in Brussels comes the reasons why we're trying to push very strongly for measurements, because the proposed directive is an important driver for finding out the status. And this is where I think we can actually have a look at what this will become. So I'm going to talk about the project outcomes very briefly and how the automated checker works, also in high level, but give you the principles, and then show you some of the preliminary results we have. They are still preliminary because we will yet encounter a couple of issues with this data, and we're still working on some quality assurance aspects. And I'll also encourage you to try it out, to try how the checkers work, so you can see this for yourselves. The project has been supported and still is by the FP7 from the European Commission to harmonize web accessibility, in particular the web accessibility evaluations. And the idea is to harmonize methods and tools and results, so that the methods behind the evaluations will become more similar or transparent so people can use them. And so the tools and also results, so you can compare across countries or evaluation results from different tools coming out. To do this, we have chosen to run an open approach with a focus on accountability and participation. And the reason is that we think enabling people to see how the evaluations are done is absolutely crucial. First, to have trust in the evaluations, and secondly, to be able to use them properly and reproduce the results. So you can see that when you have made a change, it's hopefully improving the performance of the evaluation. As a consequence, we have developed open source software, and the data will be openly available for people to review and use. To make this work properly, we need feedback from users. We already received very important feedback from several users. I can mention in particular from Iceland we had helpful feedback, and this is something we hope can continue and go on so that we can assure that the quality is increasing. This is not something we're doing in a short term or with a small number of people. It's an effort of a number of organizations. They are listed in the website, and they will also be in an accessible format. So you can look at the EIII.eu website to have the full overview of the participants in the project. So to give you names and titles for who to contact during the day about the outcomes of the project, I'd like to mention that Annika Nietzsche has been working on methods. She's sitting in the middle of the room here, and she will also be able to be reached by email. You can find details on the website. We'll put this out together with the presentation materials. She's also working on methodologies for the computing of scores, and metrics, and audiovisual media, for the accessibility evaluation of audiovisual media, to see that, for example, a video is properly presented and has captions and these things. Also for specifications and the way we can define how to use the guidelines from W3C into test specifications is an area where Annika has been working. Eric is going to present the user testing tool, I think even live today a bit later. This is something that will supplement automated testing results. That's the idea, that we can cover more ground in terms of more tests with a user testing tool. Then we had some interaction with policymakers, and this has been spearheaded by Jeroen Pastor. I'm not sure if he is in the room yet, but hopefully he will come in during the day so you can talk to him about these survey recommendations from the project. Raf is also sitting in the room, and he will be happy to answer questions about a, I think, approach, we can call it, for web accessibility assurance, which is more of a method for making sure that a system is in place so you can find people who are responsible for fixing issues on websites. So I think this could fit nicely together with the measurements and responsibilities, and this is something that can work better in the future. Kim is our outreach man and will be happy to provide documentation. And then I'll move along to the automated checker tools. So if we look at the website called checkers.eiii or EIII as we call it, .eu, you find the checker tool there. It actually includes several different checkers, and it also includes a search service. So you can search a number of related sources, including the information provided by W3C, and information we have gathered from users and our own work on frequently asked questions, both about results and about tools. So you can try this search out there. If you want to try to check a website, you can do this through a login, and then you specify which site you want to check, and you will get a result within maybe a quarter of an hour. Then the site is crawled in terms of 60 pages, and it is presented as a report online. If you just want to check one page, you can enter the URL on this web page, and you get rather quickly a result presented as an HTML page on the tool. Further tools that are available is a PDF checker, and we will come back to this one. We will also look at one example for how this can work out. If we look at the neighbor house here, the European Parliament, they have a website that looked like this a couple of days ago. It has a news section, and it has some description of committees, and you can browse very rich sources of information on this website. So let's check it. And we found a couple of barriers on a PDF document. We found 4 barriers in a PDF document about democracy revisited, and they are then presented in such a way that the person who has created a PDF document should be able to regenerate it and remove these barriers. The idea is to have this as an iteratively used tool, so you can change your, maybe it's a Word document or some other source, create a new PDF, upload, and check it again until you have removed the barriers. We actually see that several people use it in this way already, because there are some traces left in the scores that we can see in the log files. And then the same document seems to have a sequence of lowering the scores, and barriers are being removed. If we try the web page of the European Parliament, we also get a few barriers yet. Obviously, they are working on this, so I think if we check it in a month's time, there will be fewer. Let's have a little look at the barriers we found. One example we can see is the accessible name for image links. And in the tool, you will get a description of the code of the page where this particular barrier is sitting. So this would help the developer to actually go in and change this particular piece of code on the website so that the barrier is removed. Just to show you where it is sitting, this is an image with some people probably attending a conference and clapping their hands. That's the image we found, and the problem is that it's not properly described. The link behind this image, so you know where you're going to. The link has a description saying go to page, which is not very helpful. We don't know which page it is going to. And then to give you an idea about how we can take this functionality and use it multiple times on multiple websites. We are working on and continuously developing an architecture, a software architecture, which mainly our head developer is working on, Björnar, sitting over here. He is preparing something we call a bus for connecting different components of this tool, which is consisting of a crawler actually downloading content from the website, and a sampler selecting pages from the website, and a checker who's doing the actual checking. And the idea is that these tools are repeated, so they're working in parallel. We have several crawlers and several checkers working in parallel, so we can have a higher production rate of producing the data. This architecture is designed in an open and scalable way, and we're gradually replacing tests we have from a former implementation into those defined by AutoWCAG, the W3C community, which is also open and designed to make very thorough test specifications. So let's look at what is coming out of these evaluations. We have looked at 1,065 websites. And we need to be aware that these data are not good for certification. We keep getting questions, can I certify my website with this tool? No, sorry, you can't. You can only show that you still may be having some barriers that we find, and that they will be reported. If we don't, welcome Shari. If we don't report any barriers, that doesn't mean you don't have any. It only means that we can't find any more barriers automatically. This is important to understand, so that the score is not giving you a free ride to say that now everything is done. But it is good for finding where barriers are actually sitting. It will oftentimes guide you to exactly where is this problem on the website. It's also good for monitoring development over time. What was the performance, what was the problems with a particular website or web page a month ago, and is it now any better? It's also, of course, good for larger amounts of websites and web pages. It's horribly boring for most of us to look at hundreds of web pages and actually get the results out of each of them manually. Still, many tests cannot be automated. There are a number of tests, for example, the comparison between a description of an image and the image content itself. There are automatic ways, but they're imprecise and hardly usable for this particular purpose, at least at the moment. So we don't do them. And there are other tests that needs a person to understand the content of a page and compare it to a title, for example. But we can check, is there indeed a title defined? Or is there indeed a description of an image? These are simple things we can test and then present. We will implement more tests, and this is likely to change the benchmarking list somewhat. So this is one of the developments we can look at in the future. So here we have the first list of countries. We have aggregated scores from roughly 30 sites per country, and we can see that the Netherlands is doing the best in this list, so I think we should give the people from the Netherlands a round of applause today. I am sorry to say that Norway is not very much in the lead today, but we're working on it, and Norway has a very, I think, promising legislation. So this is hopefully going to drive some development there. For the numbers, we looked at 500,000 pages roughly, and we have checked 1,065 sites and applied 37 tests on them. We spent roughly 2 months to gather this data, which is because we had an iterative process with development and running the tests. The country scores are varying between 72 and 91, so it's not a very big difference. It is a significant difference, but not a very big one between those who are having the best and the poorest performance in this score. This can be assumed, since we are aggregating several websites, that it's not going to show that large a span. So if we look at this website score, then it is indeed having the span from 45 to 99, and the average is 82. So if we look at the top and the bottom of the list, we notice that it's a police station doing the very best in our list, the Thames Valley Police in the UK. It turns out that this police station actually had some targeted activities for web accessibility. So it seems that this indeed paid off for them. And possibly there are some of the websites in the lower end of the list that could learn from those who have had some activities in the higher end. So I think this is one of the important things from ranking or doing the benchmarks, that you can find aspects that are good and then see how these can be implemented on those who still have some more work to do. To give you an idea about what kind of data can further be derived from this kind of measurements, we picked out 3 tests. One is the use of the alt tag of image elements, oftentimes used, and then we have the primary language of a page, which is important for screen readers and other software to be able to actually have the right language setting and making the synthetic speak intelligible. Reading a Norwegian page with the English speak configuration is a very, very tedious experience. You won't really understand what's going on then. And then we have the accessible name for image links, which is important to understand where am I being taken if I traverse this particular link. So we can, from this overview, see that the image tags are correctly used in close to 80% of the cases we have tested. So this is not the worst one at the moment in the sample we have collected. If we then look at the situation in the aggregation of websites per country, there we see that we finally found something where Norway is doing the best. So indeed, there seems to be something the Norwegian government has been doing in a good way to make people understand that they need to describe their images. And possibly the websites in Romania could have a look at how this has been done in the Netherlands or in Norway, and see if there is some policy measures or some initiatives for creating awareness that has been successful, and maybe that's something that could be modeled. If we look at the next test we have analyzed in somewhat more depth, we see that the percentage of links with accessible names, then again Norway is doing quite well. So it seems that this awareness and policy has had some impact. We see that Turkey, Spain and Lithuania have a further way to walk here. It's not clear why these differences are there. We haven't had time to actually interview people who might have some ideas in these countries. But I think this could be a very interesting analysis to carry out, try to find out where does these differences come from. Admittedly, a sample of 30 sites, it's not very big, but we did some little changes of the numbers and saw that it is not likely to change a whole lot. if we increase the number. But we will try to do this later on and see if that has an impact of this situation. But if we then look at the next test, the percentage of image elements with descriptions, we see that Lithuania is doing very well. So then suddenly Lithuania is actually having the best performance of all the countries we looked at. So this is showing that if we break down the results into individual tests, we can get data that is potentially something that can be fed into policies or courses or some other initiatives to enable people to do a better job when they're building or buying websites. So to conclude, we think that automated testing is very helpful to explore the status, and also can be useful to find out what are differences between different countries or perhaps even vendors. It would be possible to have a meta information about a website, who provided this, what is the CMS behind it, the content management system. And in this way, it would be possible to inform the developers of a content management system that you need to have a hint for your users editing the pages in the news section so that they can describe their images correctly. Or make some changes that will make it easier to do things the right way. And then the automated testing is, of course, very helpful for repeated evaluations, and therefore to monitor trends, to find out what's going on over time. Does our policy measures have any impact? It's also useful for repairing. If we find that there is a problem, did our fix actually fix it? We can test again. We don't need to have a new audit of the full website. We can just test this particular little thing. And also for developers, to make sure that this new module is indeed doing what it should, then automated testing is helpful. Even more helpful, we think it will be to combine the user testing with the automated testing, and then we can, at least for a smaller sample of web pages, actually cover a quite large set of tests. And possibly we can even make this as a crowdsourcing enabling facility, so that many people can go out and test whatever they feel is important to test, and thereby collect experience and data about these sites. So finally, I'd also like to mention that testing on demand, this interactive kind of testing, can be used already now for developers. We see that some of the vendors in Norway are doing this, and their customers are saying, we found this particular barrier. They send a link to the problem, and the vendor can go and fix it. And it can also be conceived, and we see that for the PDF part, that the state authority for maps in Norway is using, they're referring to the PDF checker to their suppliers. If they are requesting something from their suppliers, they need to go through the PDF checker before they accept it. So this is the status of the data we have at the moment. For those who might be interested in looking in more details, we can extract data from the database and make it available. The available data at the moment in the user interfaces is somewhat limited, because we don't really yet know what will be the most interesting parts to present in a user interface. So this is one of the parts where we're happy to see feedback and interaction with you further on. So thank you very much.
Terrific, Mikael. Thank you very much for giving us an overview of the preliminary benchmarking results from the EIII. I think that was very useful. And I'm really glad that you found a category in which Lithuania topped the list to make our host a little bit happy. So with that, I would like to conclude the first couple of sessions and move on to the panels. So please join me to thank Arnoldas for hosting us so graciously, for Liz to providing the keynote, and then, of course, to Mikael to provide the announcement of the preliminary results. Let's thank them one more time.